Or shot fire, officer down, shot fire, officer down. Got a city officer down, shot fire.
223, be advised, we have a visual on enemy paratroopers in grid Papa uniforms.
Welcome to the Resilient Warrior Nation, a podcast dedicated to inspiring hope and healing for first responders, military veterans, and anyone facing PTSD and trauma. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Resilient Warrior Nation podcast. I'm your host, Mike Morgan, and I created this podcast to essentially do for others what was done for me by the Sean Ryan Show. 2 years ago, I sat down to watch an episode, and his guest was a man named Eddie Penny, a former Navy SEAL Team 6 guy. Eddie was recounting the story of the Extortion 17 incident in which a Chinook got shot down by insurgents in Afghanistan, killing all 38 aboard, including 17 SEALs. It was the largest loss in the SEAL community in one day at the time, and I believe it still has, thank God, not been beaten. But as Eddie is recounting the story, he's talking about escorting his best friend Jason Workman's body back to his hometown, and he was visibly upset, rightly so. I simultaneously began thinking about a 2-year-old found floating in a pool call that I had 5 years before. I'm a 30-year retired police officer, and I began crying like a baby. Realized that the things that I've been going through over the past couple of years probably signalized some sort of PTSD. Decided at that point I needed to heal. I was not going to live with this. If I could heal from it, I was going to do so. This is actually Eddie's company. It's not a proclamation. And it's just a matter of time before I meet Eddie in person to tell him he changed the entire trajectory of my life. But in Eddie subconsciously telling me it was okay to cry because I absolutely lost it, I decided that one way that I would pay it forward is by having ordinary people who've done extraordinary things with their lives come on and tell us about their stories, which will hopefully inspire and give hope to others going through it. Today, I am super pumped. We are recording on Memorial Day. How appropriate. My guest is Rob Sweetman. Rob joined the Navy at 28 years old to become a Navy SEAL. In 2012, at the age of 29, he completed BUD/S Class 284, where he had sustained a quadruple hernia requiring surgery. After healing, he served 8 years, where he completed 2 deployments with SEAL Team 7. He then became an instructor at Advanced Training Command. He was eventually medically retired after a back injury, but he was suffering from multiple other hidden injuries, which included PTSD, traumatic brain injury, TBI, obstructive sleep apnea, and insomnia. At one point, Rob was requiring Ambien or NyQuil to go to sleep and stimulants to wake up. Then on April 23rd, 2017, one of Rob's platoon mates, Ryan Larkin, took his own life after suffering from PTSD and TBI. Rob was severely impacted by Ryan's death and took it upon himself to better understand the causation factors related to Ryan's suicide. Ryan's father, Frank, launched research into TBIs, while Rob dove deeply into sleep science, dedicating his life to the study of sleep science to help all people, including veterans. It was then that Rob discovered the bi-directional relationship between sleep and mental health, crystallizing the fact that poor sleep can cause a multitude of mental health conditions to include suicide. Rob created his company, Genie US, to help address the millions of people across the world who are struggling to sleep at night. Recently, Rob acquired the Happy Canyon Ranch near Telluride, Colorado, where he hosts retreats to help people get back into balance. I am absolutely humbled and honored to have Rob as a guest today. Rob, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Mike, and boy, it's been a while. We've been trying to get together for a while, huh?
Absolutely, brother. But as I know, since the last 14 months have told me the universe makes everything happen when it's supposed to. Everyone is supposed to be where they are supposed to be at all times. So it was supposed to happen today on Memorial Day, brother. How appropriate again. And I thank you for your service, and I extend my condolences for your losses that you've suffered throughout your career. All your brothers that have made the ultimate sacrifice, given their lives for perfect strangers. To me, there's not a more noble purpose that a man can give.
I agree. The Memorial Day, boy, it carries a lot of emotion for a lot of us. I don't feel as if I should be thanked for anything. I know that's a common response, but when I think about the people who have given their lives fighting in combat in crazy situations it just blows my mind. I think back to my grandfather in World War II. I think back to the last 20 years in Afghanistan. I think back to all the people that I've come in contact in the military. And a lot of people have lost their lives. As well, a lot of people have taken heavies downrange and brought back invisible injuries that they don't even really know how to describe, and people don't fully understand it or them, and end up taking their own lives. And so I think if I were to focus on one thing from Memorial Day, it would be the essence of giving to serve others, to serve a higher cause, to serve our great country. And there's a lot of people who've done that in many different capacities, and my hats are off to them.
Very well said, brother. And I think an important thing you just said was a lot of men and women come back with these hidden injuries and are not even aware that they've suffered them. I remember I hosted Jimmy Watson, a former brother of yours, another SEAL, and we were speaking about PTSD and the misconceptions. And I myself, after a 30-year police career, was still not clear on what PTSD meant, how it was suffered. I always thought that you essentially had to see your brother or sister next to you get killed. Mine personally was being inside the most devastatingly intimate moments of other people's lives over and over and over and over, whether it's delivering a death notification, responding to a suicide by one of their family members, um, you know, motor vehicle accidents, natural DOAs, just a multitude of ways. And their lives were one way before I appeared, and their life is forever going to change after I left their house or wherever we had met that day. And never gave credence to how serious that was. Never processed it. Just bury, went on to the next one. So what you say is so, so true. A lot of these men and women have no idea they even suffer these. How about you? Did you feel the same coming back?
Well, it's hard to talk about myself. I don't want to sound like a pity party. I'll tell you
Not
that
at all.
I did take some heavies. I think any team guy who goes through training and operation, you're shooting 50 cals, and I carried a Mark 48, which is a belt-fed machine gun, or slap charges or Carl G's, or even law rockets. Like, these things have such a big impact on your gentle, or delicate is the word, brain, that you can go through an entire career of using these weapons and not even realize that you're damaging your brain. Now we know, and probably in the last 5 years we've had more advances in our understanding of blast TBI than ever in recorded history. But now we know through cross sections of the brain, post-mortem of folks like Ryan Larkin that you mentioned, and others, that there's astroglial scarring in the brain. There's white matter damage. There's damage that reduces the brain's ability to function, that can't be picked up by regular fMRI. You have to, you go in for a brain scan. They look at your brain. You're fine, right? You're good to go, but you're not. In fact, they need more advanced technology to be able to detect this stuff. And it's not because the injury is not severe. It's absolutely debilitating. Things like sensitivity to light and confusion and dizziness and lightheadedness. And, I remember when I got out of the Navy, I couldn't remember my best friend's name. And it's not that I'm stupid. It's not that I can't remember things. It's that I go to recall it, and it's just not there. And so it's interesting because the intersection between traumatic brain injury, this physical blast injury, which is similar to traumatic brain injury from like football. It's not the same, but in the same wheelhouse. The symptoms from that and PTSD, and I don't even like the term PTSD. I think the VA should abolish it. I think it should be post-traumatic stress, or a better descriptor, some type of recurring thought pattern surrounding trauma. Because, I don't want to get on a tangent here, but the psychological community has a really bad problem with labeling people. And that's how they have to, right? So they can give you your drugs, which I'm totally against. But anyways, if we just take a look at the whole person, post-traumatic stress, and I get it when it becomes chronic and recurring, It's a disorder, but I just disagree with the labeling. So if we look at the symptomology of PTS and TBI, in fact, organizations like the VA, which is the largest healthcare organization in the United States, perhaps the world, they don't even know the difference in TBI and PTS. It's
Wow.
absolutely pathetic. And it's not that they don't want to do better, it's that the tools are so limited by the controlling organizations that allow certain things and disallow certain things. I mean, for one, we know that the pharmaceutical companies control a lot of the marketing and a lot of the funding for a lot of organizations, including the FDA. And I mean, the list of contributors, the way that the money flows from pharmaceuticals is so corrupt that there's just absolutely no way that you can get away from it. Okay, so once we get past that, then you get into serious policy issues, and we can talk about the VA and non-VA, but the VA specifically does not allow research outside of their own closed cell network. So they do their own research, they do their own little peer review amongst each other, and they don't allow the universities that are doing groundbreaking research to add to their library of knowledge. So it's a closed system. A lot of it is bought and sold. It's really a shame. And so this is what we're up against when we leave the military. And for me, coming back from deployment and transitioning out of the Navy, this is it. This is what you get. You get the VA. You got one problem, that's one pill. Two problems, another pill. Three problems, another pill. And rarely do they even look at drug interactions. Not that they don't know how to, not that they don't want to, but they're so busy, overwhelmed, checked out, and they have a 2-year cycle and they're off to somewhere else. So they become siloed within orthopedics, mental health, you name it. Every single category has a different doctor, a different diagnosis, a different drug, and you leave with a basket of pills. SSRIs and sleeping pills, a bunch of crap that does nothing but destroy your ability to recover. And either the veteran looks at it and says, okay, I'll give it a shot, and the next years of their life are destroyed, or they throw it down the toilet and say, I'm going to try something else. The problem is, sometimes it's alcohol, sometimes it's marijuana, sometimes it's street drugs to try to manage what they feel in these problems. And I don't fault them. I do not say that someone is wrong for trying to solve their problems, because it makes sense, especially for us men. We want to fix, we want to solve the problem. So now we're looking at what are the solutions, and my particular solution to a lot of these problems, and this may sound silly to people who've never heard me talk about this topic, is that sleep is at the core of both brain recovery, metabolic recovery, mental health. All of these things are related to sleep. And if your sleep is not functioning correctly, or you're not getting enough sleep, or it's not high quality enough sleep, or you're not getting into that first really deep sleep and the first cycle of sleep and getting that testosterone release and that human growth hormone release, which, by the way, is more difficult to do when you're drugged up. If we can solve some of those things, it sounds silly, but we can actually completely transform your life. Give you better brain health, give you better metabolic health, better endocrine function, wake up feeling with energy, wake up in a better mood, approach your spouse, engage with them in a more meaningful way. And so I guess I would say that it took several years for me to figure out my own crap, solving all these problems that I picked up in the Navy. But now, because of what I've learned and what I've seen, specifically because I have a fiery, burning passion about Ryan Larkin, is that I've dedicated the last 8 years of my life. Mike, we're almost at a decade. I've been serving veterans and first responders to try to help them with their sleep. And I got to tell you, the information that I've uncovered, you're not going to find it anywhere else. Why? Because there's not a business model attached to it with pharmaceutical profit margins. It's just good, healthy behaviors.
Rob, I'll tell you, sleep, if you think about it, I don't know if there's one subject in our lives that we take for granted more than sleep. If you're getting it, you never think about it if you're getting healthy sleep. If you don't, that's all that's on your mind. And think about this, if you guys and girls are watching right now, one bad night of sleep, look how that next day unfolds for you. Your memory's not as good, you're not as sharp, you're obviously tired, but it affects every facet of your life. Now, start coupling that with 2 nights and 3 nights and 4 nights and, maybe insomnia. I can't imagine something that would affect you more than bad sleep. And obviously, you just mentioned Ryan Larkin. Can you tell us a little bit about Ryan's story?
Yeah, absolutely. I just did a 60-minute special with Henry Schuster, where his dad Ryan was the focus of the special. Now, Ryan Larkin's dad has taken the football all the way down the field with traumatic brain injury, and I mean in a big way. He's helped so many people, both with donating Ryan's body to science and allowing Dr. Pearl to do that cross section of his brain and finding out more about traumatic brain injury, as well as raising money for TBI research and pushing the narrative and helping educate people. And in the same way, I've focused on sleep. Now, was the reason why Ryan took his life because of sleep? Was it because of traumatic brain injury? We will never know. But I'll tell you this, I watched his sleep health go down, down, down before that event happened, and that's what stuck in my mind. Moreover, you have no hope of recovering from traumatic brain injury, and I'd be happy to explain why, if you're not getting adequate sleep. Now,
Please.
is sleep disrupted from traumatic brain injury? Absolutely. Is traumatic brain injury able to be completely cured with good sleep? Not necessarily. But I'll tell you this, one thing that happens, right? So imagine, let me paint one picture, and then I'll paint a different picture, and then we'll do a comparative analysis, okay?
Okay.
You're a high-functioning individual, Navy SEAL, a cop on a really heavy beat, whatever it is, you're locked on, and you have to be very alert, right? You have to be, in the military, we call it situational awareness and attention to detail. Why? Because that'll cost you your life if you don't have your wits about you. And by the way, being this way, super dialed in all the time, has saved my life, okay? So now we go into a sleep period, and we've been worked up all day. Maybe we've been on missions, maybe we had to shoot somebody, maybe we had to defend ourselves, and now we're worked up and we're leading into sleep. Do we want to go to sleep? We feel like, oh crap, I just got to get some rack out so I can go back out the door and do it again the next day. So what happens is, if we are in a sympathetic nervous system state, which we call this activated, sometimes we call it fight or flight, that's how we're functioning to be in this survival mechanism, to be razor sharp, to be able to address the threat. But our autonomic nervous system actually has a different mode, right? And so if we're sympathetically engaged to our environment, if we switch it, we become parasympathetic. So I'll put a pause on that and come back to that later. So we enter into sleep with higher noradrenaline levels in our brain, with a higher anxiety level, with a higher activation. And when we go into sleep, our sleep, we don't quite hit as deep of a sleep as we want. We're more susceptible to awakening. Our sleep is more shallow. We're a little bit more restless. And most likely we're going to short sleep, and most likely we're not going to get the depths that we want. Now combine that with traumatic brain injury and potentially dehydration, if we're adding in alcohol, which is not good, then all of a sudden we have this broken sleep. Next morning, what do? We crack a Monster or a Rip It or a coffee or whatever, and we push through because we're men. Or for the women out there, because we're tough, right? And this is what we do. We're war fighters. We save people. We do what's right. And we have this greater mission, and that empowers us. And what happens is, over time, because we're not getting good enough sleep, we develop hypertension, or we develop cancer, or we develop mental health issues, or you name it, right? And so we have all these things that will creep up on you because we're not getting good sleep, because this is just how we operate. And even when you retire, we have something at Naval Postgraduate School we call circadian scarring. Even when you retire, you look back at your sleep and you're like, well, this is just normal for me. Well, yeah, normal sucks. And just because that's what you're doing now and that's what you've conditioned yourself to do, you've scarred yourself circadian-wise, that doesn't mean that it's healthy, and it doesn't mean that's right. So how the hell do we reprogram it? How do we start fresh? How do we get back to where we can have this restorative cycle? Okay, now, that's the first example. Okay, no hope of recovering from blast exposure, no hope of keeping up with metabolic health, no hope with any of these recovery processes, these beautiful things that God built inside of us to happen while we're sleeping. And by the way, we're not even going to get on the dream space. Getting into the dream world and processing trauma within the dream space, that is how we're designed. If you're not getting that, that's a whole other topic. We'll talk about that later. So the second example, we have a person who, yes, they have a crazy day. In fact, most of us have a crazy day every day. That's just life. And if it's not crazy, somehow we find a way to make it crazy, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of that day, that person has to be able to take off their psychological armor to transition into sleep in an effective and safe and healthy way. So what do? Whether it's physical armor or psychological armor, we have a transition to where we say, okay, I'm going to stop worrying about the world. I'm going to stop being in survival mode, stop going to be in defensive mode, and I'm going to accept the world around me, relax, down-regulate, and allow my nervous system to get into what's called parasympathetic. We also call that rest and digest. And you can feel the energy shift towards digestion and recovery. A lot of times your mouth will salivate, your hands will be warm. There's different changes in your body. And the better that you get at feeling this and understanding this, you can feel the shift. It's crazy, right?
Okay.
So now
Yeah.
we down-regulate some of that noradrenaline from activation in our brain. It lowers, right? We start to feel tired. We start to feel that yawning coming on. Right? Maybe we get into our bedclothes, we have a routine, we do some of that breath work that Wim Hof teaches or somebody else. We really get into our zone because we respect our body, we respect the sleep period. In fact, we've created our bedroom to be a sleep dojo because it's a third of our life and it's so important. And now we walk into our bed, we hit the pillow, and we fall deep into sleep. And during that time, when we fall deep into that first, they call it slow wave sleep, stage 3, stage 4, we immediately, within 15 minutes, the average person on a normal sleep schedule or a normal sleep period, they're going to fall into that deep sleep immediately. And I always use my hand like this because I'm representing the brainwave activity on the hypnogram, right? So we fall into that deep sleep. What happens during that deep sleep? That is the largest portion of deep sleep we'll have throughout the cycling all night through our sleep. In fact, that's where a lot of metabolic recovery, cellular recovery, that's our largest pump of testosterone release, that's our largest pump of HGH release. And by the way, that doesn't happen, it's fickle. If you're a little bit unsettled, it just doesn't happen, right? You need that, right? And so then something else happens that many of your listeners may not have ever heard before. Your brain can reduce in size by as much as 60% when you're truly relaxed. It allows the cerebral spinal fluid to come in and wash away things like tau protein buildup, which is what we see with traumatic brain injury, or beta amyloid buildup, which we know is the precursor for Alzheimer's, right? So you have to allow your brain to be able to do that. They call that the glymphatic system. So now you're rinsing away all that waste. You can see the blood perfusion in an fMRI of somebody going into deep sleep because the blood-brain barrier, the blood, it fills the area that is now changed because the brain reduces in size. You can see it, right? Google it, right?
Funny. I've never heard that concept. It's pretty funny.
Nobody's ever heard that, right? We're rinsing our brain away from toxins from the day, and we need to do this every day if we can. So then we cycle from deep sleep back into dream sleep. And we successfully go through this cycle. We're going to have less awakenings, which, by the way, waking up to go to pee, nothing wrong with you. That's normal, especially during dream sleep. But we cycle through this with less, with deeper sleep, not deep sleep, but less shallow sleep, right? And we're able to maintain these sleep cycles in a much more effective manner. In the morning, we feel that we've got full recovery. We feel emotionally complete. Our brain doesn't hurt because we were able to get that brainwashing, as it was, to occur. And that's how we sustain health. We know that if we're not getting good sleep, we're going to be slower on the trigger. Our 100-meter sprint is going to be slower. Our max lifts are going to be slower. Our cognition is going to be slower. And if you stay up as much as 20 hours, you're legally inebriated. We have blood alcohol equivalency charts. Yeah, man. We have, at Naval Postgraduate School, blood alcohol equivalency charts. Roughly 20 hours of 0.08. 24 hours, you're looking at a 0.10. We can prove it. That's crazy.
That's incredible. Yeah, I had no idea. It was like, it was measurable, number one. Number two, that the numbers are that high. That's incredible after only 20 hours.
How many 20 hours have you pulled in your past, Mike?
Exactly. Immeasurable. And then, I mean, looking at you guys and the, the schedule, if you will, I don't even know if you call it that. It's incredible. Let me ask you this. Do you think that going through Hell Week affected you potentially? So let me say another SEAL who's not as into with his sleep. can affect that man for the rest of his life.
Yeah,
Like that one
absolutely.
week,
Yeah,
really, it's so severe, the
it's
depletion.
it's very examined, and I think maybe we should be cautious about examining things like this because we get too many people involved. Then they start to shut stuff down and overregulate stuff. Look, my mission, and if you'd like to talk about this, I'm happy to. We can take this whatever direction you want, but my current mission is in December, we decided to go to D.C. and we hosted a march where we had over 100 SEALs, roughly 200 veterans in Washington, D.C. It's the largest showing of Navy SEALs for any political event, especially Secretary of Defense. And we packed that Dirk's hall, that Senate hall, for Pete Hegseth's hearing, and we were there to support him in solidarity, peacefully, with respect to Martin Luther King Jr., the way he would have wanted it done. We marched with flags, we did the whole thing, and he was elected because we want change, or he was confirmed. And so now a lot of my focus is, okay, now we have a young Secretary of Defense who can actually make a difference, who is actually open to new ideas, who is not bought and sold by the military-industrial complex, who has not had a career of ties winding him into some type of a complex agreement structure that goes on behind closed doors. He's a fresh, young face with good ideas. If you read the works that he's written and look at his education, solid, amazing American. But I think we might be able to move the needle on sleep health because our military needs it in terms of readiness. Right now, our military is in the worst situation, and first response is, since COVID, the numbers have not looked good. But the DoD specifically, last year the GAO came out with a report saying, yet again, our sleep is so bad that it is affecting our readiness. What does that mean? That means our military is sleep deprived. That means our military is going to have mishaps. We can almost guarantee that something is going to happen when you are legally inebriated on a blood alcohol equivalency. Now you see I'm starting to get into all this, right? So if you have an entire force of people who are sleep deprived, then you have collisions like in 2017. 2 Navy ships, not just one, 2. 19 kids died in 2017 because the ships collided. Why? The
Wow.
investigation showed sleep deprivation, period. So 2024, the numbers are released. China can see this. Iran can see this. Everyone can see this. We are completely sleep deprived. We can do better, and I know how to do it. And so my goal right now is to really support our Secretary of Defense, the Pentagon, our DoD, in getting our readiness levels up, making sure that our warfighters are the tip of the spear, they get enough adequate rest, and that we're ready for combat.
Yeah, it's amazing how incredibly important that is. And it's funny, like looking at the medical industry, you see doctors in med school, as they're doing in rotations, they're doing, I don't know if it's 24 or 36 on. And when they are asked about why they carry on this tradition, they essentially say because it was done to us. To me, it makes absolutely zero sense. Yeah, I understand you guys went through it, but if we're showing that these effects are so debilitating on decision making, why are we still continuing that? Obviously you can't answer that question in the medical field, but some of these policies that have an effect scream change, yet it goes at a glacially pace sometimes. Um, I just wanted to shift focus a little bit now. In
Yep.
speaking about Peace Hedgepeth, I have healed using psychedelics. I know a lot of your brothers have healed using psychedelics. I actually became aware of them by watching Sean Ryan show and him speaking to special force operators coming back broken men essentially from war and healing. What is your opinion on psychedelics, and how do you think that Hedgepeth should kind of go about, if it's not instituting him as far as being, a new policy to allow members to do it, researching the effects that they've had, because obviously big pharma does not want these things available to the public. They're all trying to synthesize these medicines and see how they can make money off them, and I guarantee you as soon as they do that, they're going to become legalized. But what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's a big topic. So first of all, the opioid epidemic, which came from pharmaceuticals and was administered by the drug dealers known as MDs, And God bless the MDs for signing the dotted line and committing to an oath for helping people. But if people weren't aware of what they were doing at the time when they were divvying out these opioids for all that period of time, I lost a friend to this, then I don't know what to say other than open up your eyes. I think we're going to
Yeah.
see a benzo epidemic. I think we're going to see a non-benzo epidemic. I think all this stuff is going to be revealed. This is the worst drug cartel the world has ever seen. Way worse than marijuana, cocaine, any of these street drugs. Fentanyl is a big problem right now, but nothing in comparison to the volume of legal drugs that are actively destroying lives and killing people. So when we look at those drugs as an option, I would say let's look deeper. Let's see if there's something else that we can do. It's a better option. Right now, I think we had some $50 billion distributed from the pharmaceutical companies who were found guilty in the opioid epidemic. A lot of that money has been shifted towards psychedelic assisted therapy research. And so the challenge with that is that based on what I've seen, and there's a lot of guys that I know of that have successfully navigated psychedelic assisted therapy, is that a lot of that money is going towards the medical community, understanding how they can capture that. And by capture, I mean put it into their sterile office and profit on it, unfortunately. I think that there are a lot of benefits to looking at these alternative types of treatment. I've heard nothing but good things. However, I do think we need to have some guardrails. So between what I've seen, which is a lot of out of the country where it's legal to do these therapies and these types of medicine, getting into a completely unregulated arena might be risky, but I think it's a greater risk to put this in the hands of the American Medical Association. So somewhere in the middle, we need to have less stringent penalties for people to be able to do this. But as I understand it, there are some significant factors to carrying on not just the plant medicine that's been around since God created it thousands of years ago or whatever, but also the traditions of shamans. They say things like set and setting and the process of interpersonal healing, like energetically. I think keeping it within the shaman realm, folks that have done this for generationally, passed it down through their families for thousands of years, I think it should remain with them. I think that it's a beautiful option that has existed before the FDA existed, and I think that we should take a really good look at it. Now, with that said, Pete Hegseth is in charge of the DoD. I'm not sure that I agree with active duty participating in this type of therapy. I'm not sure about that. But what I do know is once they are transitioned, now it becomes a Doug Collins problem, who is the Secretary of the VA. So now we have at the VA, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, the dozens of prescriptions that you're going to get going through that process. I think we need to squash that, and I think we need to take a hard look at things like psychedelic-assisted therapy that the VA will pay for, even if they partner with organizations that are already doing it. I think that might be a great idea. And leaning into more of the breath work, yoga, mindfulness, meditation, things that can see dramatic improvements in someone's health without any of the side effects or without being put into a lifelong business model. Don't forget, when a veteran gets prescribed a drug, our taxpayers pay for that prescription, enriching the pharmaceutical companies even more. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it was a very comprehensive answer. And,
Thank you.
it's funny that I was at a vet slash first responder retreat last year. And after our first ceremony, I began speaking with one of the gentlemen who was a retired Green Beret. And he was kind of telling me his life story. And he sat with ayahuasca the year before and essentially healed greatly. So he said, Mike, prior to that, I was on 17 medications.
Jeez.
No one bats an eye at that. But the second that I start using ayahuasca and heal from that, and I start telling my story, people are looking at me, sideways like I'm out of my mind. And it's just so funny. We are so brainwashed to be told a story about someone using 17 medications, and we're not like, what? It's incredulous, but we're taught or we're brainwashed in being conditioned that, yeah, ayahuasca, that what are you doing there? You can't be using stuff like that. Um, I mean, the brainwashing and the drug usage, I understand there's a place for them. They were created to be used for a short amount of time, but the amount of people that are on it, to use it as chronic medication is incredible to me. And when I was a police officer, I had a few schools, elementary and middle schools in my sector. And I remember when I was young, Rob, you would go to the nurse and she'd have a medicine cabinet and you'd see maybe one or two bottles, usually kids that were sick and, is there antibiotics? Rob, every single time that I would go to a native case at a school, typically the person would be brought into the nurse's office. The medicine cabinet would be right there, visible, and I would talk to the nurse, like, this is crazy how much medication these kids are on. She's like, they're all on, Adderall, all these ADHD medicines, all these chronic medications, antidepressants for, young kids. Come on, man. They're young kids. They're going through things. They're
Yep.
energetic. Just conditioning them all to be taught the same way by sitting them in this chair for 6 hours is not the way some kids process things. They have energy. They need to be out and about. And to just throw pills, and if there is a problem, find out what the problem is, man. It's just that it's a band-aid solution. You're not getting to the source of the problem ever. So what's your plan? To keep these kids on these medicines the entirety of their lives? Like, it's mind-boggling to me how conditioned we are as a society now.
I couldn't agree more, Mike. Did you know that 75%, which, by the way, I'm in touch with Bobby Kennedy and the MAHA team, and they just published a report on our youth and the health of our youth, and I'm happy to share that with you. But 75% of our kids are ineligible for military service. Why? Because they're obese or they have drug use. And I'm not talking about illicit drug use. I'm talking about the drugs that their parents gave them eliminates them from being able to serve in the military. And that's a damn shame. We have a problem in the United States, not just with kids, with adults. I think we're at 42% obesity. I have friends that moved here from other countries and they're like, I never saw obese people until I came to the United States. So with that said, I do believe in the MAHA movement. I think, nothing's perfect. And every time, Bobby does something amazing, somebody comes back and says, well, is he really looking at everything? There's some other things that we need to look at for health and wellness. And I'm like, listen, it is so bad that just let him do his work. And hopefully we can solve some of the big problems that we have. And then in the future, continue with somebody at Health and Human Services that can continue taking that ball down the field, because it's so bad. I mean, not only do we have a focus on allowing, in the military, allowing people to have transgender surgeries and be on medications that make them inoperable in the military, which no judgment against people who want to take that path, but not in our military. Our military is a fighting force, period. And now we're looking at how do we get recruitment numbers up when only 25% of the kids are even able to qualify, and then of those qualified, are we able to maintain the standards to get into special operations, to get into submarine, to get into these very active and demanding and requiring roles? If we don't even have the bodies to do it, what does that mean for our military? It scares me. It keeps me up at night.
It's a great question. And really, what's the answer? As you're looking at it, 75% is disqualified right off the bat. And now, when you're looking at SEAL teams and special force operators like you, obviously the numbers dwindle so much from 100% population that's eligible. Now you're dwindling those numbers down to almost nothing. How are we going to be able to field these special force teams eventually? It's mind-boggling to me. Like,
I've got a TEDx in Catawba that I'm doing in June. So if anybody wants to come to the TEDx, you can find it on the website for TEDx Catawba. But that's one of the things I'm talking about. And it's kind of funny because when you look at the big picture, I think it's 0.0008% of the U.S. is a Navy SEAL. That you couldn't even cut a penny into a small enough fraction to represent the portion of a dollar. That probably isn't a good reference, but it's such a small amount. Are we going to rely on our SEALs to do all the work, or our MARSOC, or our Special Forces Army? Or are we going to be able to maintain the fighting force that we saw from some of the greatest? And, on Memorial Day, I asked that question. It's like, what is the product that we're producing in society for the military. Is our society going to collapse if we're all sick, unable to serve, unable to defend ourselves? What are we going to do? Because the greatest generation, in my opinion, was the guys that went and fought in World War II. My grandfather being one of them. He was drafted in World War II and made it all the way through a 30-year career into Vietnam. And actually, I have his uniform I'd love to share with you. But that
Absolutely.
that greatest generation, what happened? Are we going to be able to defend ourselves? Are we even capable of creating enough human beings to defend us? If that happens, if we get into a first world conflict, that keeps me up at night.
Yeah, and it should. It should keep a lot of us up at night. Um, you look at China, and I think their military is 10 million strong,
Yeah.
whereas ours in active and guardsmen, if I'm not mistaken, is just under 2 million. We're severely understaffed in that respect. Hopefully, it never comes to that. Yeah, it wouldn't be a conventional war anyway, probably, but it's just amazing to see. Um, you had mentioned another condition that you had that I think is extremely important, and men do not pay the attention and give it the credibility that it really deserves because it affects you so greatly. Sleep apnea. I have it myself. Once I got diagnosed, I've literally used the machine every day of my life for the past probably 11 years. But can you talk about it
Yep.
and the absolute seriousness that it has upon one's body and what it does if it's not treated correct, not treated, period.
Yeah, so for people who are interested in sleep, concerned about their sleep, want to know more about their sleep, I have a free website and app called Sleep Genius. The app is Sleep Genius Community App on Google and Apple. And then the website is sleepgeni.us. If you can throw that up on wherever this video can be found, then we can direct people
Absolutely.
there. And so I wrote an article I write several articles, but I have a blog, and I wrote an article about the 10 ways to die from sleep apnea. And the reason why, for whatever reason, we don't have time to get into the cause of sleep apnea because that's highly debated. But sleep apnea is in the physical sleep apnea, not the neurological central sleep apnea. But obstructive sleep apnea affects a lot of men. It's more men than women. A heavy percentage of military. And the first thing they're going to say is, oh, well, you're fat. It's like, okay, my BMI looks good. What is it then? Oh, well, it's your neck musculature. And you're like, okay, well, maybe I should stop working out. But the truth is, whether you have a hypothesis on how you got it or not, if you are diagnosed with sleep apnea, what they're saying is that you are stopping breathing in the middle of the night. You're having an apnea event. And the way they measure that's AHI. It's how many apneas per hour. So if you have like 8 or 10, that's pretty mild. But I've seen people with as many as 70 apneas in 1 hour. They're constantly choking, right? So one of the big things that we look at is blood oxygen level. And I think I recommend a thing off Amazon you can get for $50 to measure your own pulse oximetry. Of course, the watches do it, the Apple Watch and the Fitbit and all this stuff, but they don't have a comprehensive nighttime report. The one that I recommend will give you a sleep report, right? So what we look at is how is your blood oxygen dipping? Now, this is only one factor. I don't want people to think that if they are able to get a clean bill of health on pulse ox that they don't have sleep apnea. I am not able to diagnose at all, much less over a podcast. But if you
Right.
see that your blood oxygen saturation is dropping, it could be an apnea. Your blood oxygen saturation should be 98%, at the lowest 95. If it drops below 90% into the 80s, below 80%, you have a serious medical problem that should be addressed. And very likely it's sleep apnea. If your spouse says you're snoring, if they say that you just stop breathing, sleep apnea most likely. And so what happens is we're starving our brain of oxygen, we're disrupting our sleep cycles, and this can kill you. It may take years to kill you, or it could kill you with heart failure overnight. It's not something to play with. A lot of guys are like, oh, I don't want to wear that thing because it's uncomfortable. Yeah, so is a coffin, right? And also,
Exactly.
so is the crappy way that you wake up and address your spouse and kids, right? So I think that, there's some bodybuilders out there popularizing using the sleep apnea, making it cool for guys because we have a big ego issue. But if you just take a look at
Us?
what is best for your health, consider a CPAP. As if you've already been diagnosed with obstructive sleep apnea and you're ignoring it because you don't think it's real or you think they're just trying to sell you another device, I got to tell you, it is real, and you should get on a CPAP if that's what your doctor recommends. And if you're absolutely against it, there is a mouth guard that you can do to post-set your lower mandible to open up the airways. There's Inspire surgery, which is kind of morbid, but it electrifies your muscles to open up the breathing when it detects you stop breathing. If you want to, you can start breath work. I don't want to say that goes against medical advice. There's nothing wrong with breath work, and I've seen a lot of people improve their sleep apnea symptoms with good, solid breath work. I've got breath work free
Really?
courses on Sleep Genius. Yeah, I have one colleague that has shown, that wrote a paper in the UK about completely, I don't want to get into medical diagnosis and all that, but what I'll say is that breath work will absolutely help your life one way or another. So with that said, all you guys out there that are resistant, hard-headed, go get it checked out. Get on a CPAP if that's what they recommend. It could save your life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I was speaking to someone recently who said he's got it, but he's not using the machine. And I'm like, listen, man, I don't preach to anyone, but I had it, and I can't imagine going through life every night. The worst feeling is feeling like you're choking, and you're constantly waking up with that feeling at night. Number one, not to even include all the medical effects that the disastrous medical effects they could potentially have on you. But guys, go and get that checked out if you're suffering from it. It'll greatly improve your life, I promise.
We have a little bit more time, Mike. I'm looking at my schedule. Do you mind if I share my grandfather Sweetman's military uniform?
Absolutely, brother. Please.
It would be an honor for me to share this with your viewers.
Absolutely. Please put it up there.
Let
And
me
just tell us
see.
about Gramps.
It's an honor. I appreciate the time and space to do this. So, what I want to share with you guys is on this Memorial Day, I would like to honor my grandfather. My dad recently got this uniform that had been sort of in hiding for a long time. And for me and my brother, we really weren't. My brother was a Marine. I was in the Navy. We really weren't aware of everything that my grandfather did. Now, he was drafted into the Army during World War II. And so he fought in, I believe, both theaters. We're still pulling some of the paperwork to find out more about that. But he served a 30-year career. And during that time, a lot of things happened, right? We had Korea, and then we had the kickoff of Vietnam. So what you'll notice on this uniform, other than being the highest ranked enlisted uniform that you can possibly have, is that he has ribbons. And those ribbons are really focused a lot more on Vietnam. Well, that's interesting, right? Because we always associate Grandpa with World War II. So why does he have Vietnam ribbons on there? And so I'd like to walk you guys through a quick little description of these ribbons because it's super interesting. So it turns out that he is wearing the ribbons most recent in his military career, and I'm sure that there are hundreds of other ribbons, or maybe not that many, but from World War II and all the other conflicts that he was in. But the most recent 3 rows of ribbons that we see here, well, on the top is that blue part. That is a blue rectangle with musket over silver wreath awarded to infantry soldiers who have engaged in active ground combat. So for the youth out there that's listening, guys, active ground combat in Vietnam was no freaking joke. I mean, we're talking about knives and fists and just bloody mess. On his ribbons, we see National Service Defense Medal, that's standard, Vietnam Service Medal. On that service medal, he has 3 bronze campaign stars, including indicating participation in 3 separate combat campaigns in Vietnam. He has another Republic of Vietnam campaign medal from South Vietnamese medal awarded for 6 months in Vietnam or more. Army Good Conduct Medal, that's standard. Vietnam Gallantry Cross Citation. South Vietnamese Award Unit Valor in Combat. That's crazy. The South Vietnamese gave him an award. The Vietnamese Civil Actions Medal Unit Citation for unit contributions to civil actions in support of Vietnam. I got to tell you, I read a little bit about this. Him and one other officer survived. Everyone else was killed. He made it
Wow.
through that. Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal. I think that's fairly standard. Marksmanship badge for his being an expert in carbine, the carbine rifle. I think that's fairly standard. And then his rank insignia, Command Sergeant Major. He's got all of his stripes to show 30 years of service. And then it looks like he's got a combat patch representing a unit served within the combat. It's a little unclear. This is from a long time ago. So I'll share one more thing with you, and then we'll move on from this. Let's see. Okay, this one is a little bit more graphic. I'll explain it, but for listeners that don't want to hear this, maybe plug your ears. Let's see. Okay, this is a sword awarded to my grandfather for saving a village. And this is made with a deer antler handle, and the metal is hand forged. And you might notice that the blade is curved. The design of this blade is to be thrust into the stomach, rotated 45 to 90 degrees, and pulled out to completely eviscerate the enemy. And this was awarded to him for saving that village. This is heavy stuff. And so the reason I want to tell those stories is not necessarily to uplift my family, my grandfather. I'm very proud of him. But just to kind of paint a picture of the reality and the reason why we have Memorial Day. There should be a parade in every single city across the country on Memorial Day. And a lot of us, especially the new youth, perhaps it's not their fault, but they've just forgotten. They've forgotten all of this.
Yeah.
They've forgotten the cost of what it takes to be free in this country.
No, it's the truth. And the sacrifices that, guys like yourself, your grandfather, and the hundreds of thousands that have served cannot be overstated. It's funny, people know they're out there doing their job, but when you actually talk to them about specific stories of valor, people have no idea what they're truly doing. They are just blown away at, what it actually entails. And obviously war is not pretty, far from. So in addition to the time served, these gentlemen bring all this stuff back to them or with them mentally. So it is so important for us as a country to treat them with the number one respect that they deserve, but the treatments that they deserve going forward. I was a police officer for 30 years, so I wasn't that familiar with the VA and its system processes. Just the way you guys are treated has blown me away, and not in a good way. I am shocked at the lack of continuity of care, the hoops you guys have to jump through. I think Americans as a whole have absolutely no idea how poorly we treat our veterans, and it's shame on us, frankly.
Well, we can do better. I
We
am
can.
appreciative of the VA. I do appreciate what they've done. I do appreciate the tax dollars that go towards helping veterans, because that doesn't necessarily exist for first response. I acknowledge that. So I am grateful, but I do think we can do better. And it doesn't take somebody else doing it. It takes us. It takes all of us as a country coming together, squashing the political stuff that people are currently struggling with, and coming together in unity to serve a better future. Our kids are relying on it.
Yeah, 100%. Very, very well said. So let me ask you, Rob. You came back with a TBI you had suffered. Now, was this a collective TBI? So a bunch of things kind of caused this, or was this, an example of one specific incident causing yours?
I only had one blunt force trauma TBI that I became unconscious. From the blast, I never had an unconscious event. Some people have it very bad, much worse than me. For example, I have one friend who was blown up to the point where you could sort of see inside his skull from an IED.
Wow.
And he survived, but he was never the same. In fact, I don't want to get into it because there's a lot of politics involved, but the command was less supportive than they should be. And so I guess educating and helping the commands and the leadership understand the severity and the symptoms of blast exposure TBI as well as blunt force TBI is critical, because we have a lot of guys that are going undiagnosed, they're suffering, and sometimes they act out behaviorally and they try to cover it up with alcohol, and then it makes things worse. And so I would encourage everybody to get smart on traumatic brain injury, especially if you have a spouse that suffered with that, or a friend, and try to really understand what they're going through, because in some cases it really can be a disability. Not that it takes anything away from the person, but they may struggle in ways that seem a little bit hidden or confusing, but they're just doing their best. And the blast exposure is a real thing, and I would say almost every SEAL is suffering with it.
Yeah, I mean, your brain is so fragile. It's almost impossible to me to take someone that served and not think that he suffered from one, from TBI. I had Wiz Buckley's a friend of mine, he's a former F-18 pilot, and he was on here speaking about carrier landings.
Yep.
And he, more specifically, the concussive forces, both taking off and landing on the ship. And essentially, it sounds like every single time
Yep.
one of these pilots is taking off or landing on the ship, it's causing concussive type forces on their brain. And it's so important to be aware of that, number one. Number two, I don't know, what is there a solution to something like that? Like, we know it's causing it. Is there anything that we could do to prevent it? And
Yeah.
what would your response be on that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I agree with you on all that. I would say this is the message that I want to leave with folks, that as I push forward and try to impact sleep in the military, the first thing is that we must acknowledge the reality of the situation, which is, if you join the military, you will have sleepless nights. To complete the mission, you will have to sleep deprive if the duty calls on you. In training operations, you may have to sleep deprive. This is what we do because we are tough, and this is what we have to do to get the job done. However, where I draw the line and where I really advocate for is when you have an opportunity, when you're in garrison, there's absolutely no excuse to willfully sleep deprive. You're literally putting your team at risk. And so, yes, I think there's a way to mitigate traumatic brain injury blast exposure. Perhaps it's better education and better rules and better restraint on some of the blast causing weaponry. I'm not sure how we'd get around that for an F-18 launch and capture. But then as we go through this career, and it's the same for first response, we are going to take heavies. We know what we signed up for. This is the reality of the situation. So we'll try to get as good of sleep as we possibly can, because believe it or not, that is the miracle pill, right? If we can use an analogy to healing ourselves. And then as we transition out of service, we have to really make sure that we're focusing on good health, because we have all taken a lot of heavies. So I would say that please visit my website, get educated on sleep, the superpowers that it carries. You can have some recovery from traumatic brain injury. You can have some recovery from metabolic dysfunction or endocrine dysfunction. You don't necessarily have to go straight on TRT. If you're getting good sleep, a lot of these things will heal themselves, and I know how to do it. Mike, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor, and what a great thing to do on Memorial Day.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you for coming on. It was absolutely my honor to have you on here. Love to have you on down the line. I mean, you have so much knowledge and so much to talk about. You have time constraints. I know you're on to another one to educate more people. But, brother, what you're doing is so noble. And obviously, there are not many people doing it, but it is so important. So, guys, all the links are going to be in the bio for anything to reach Rob. Please do so if you have any questions whatsoever. He is a wealth of knowledge. As you can see, he's just a super intelligent guy who's devoted his life to this. So, Rob, I want to thank you again for your service. Thank you again for appearing. And, brother, I wish you the best. And, again, hopefully see you on here again in the future as well.
Thanks, brother, and go America.